I trusted my brother to help run the small business I built from scratch, believing he wanted the best for me, until I found out he transferred all the profits into his account and left me facing bankruptcy while smiling to my face as if nothing was wrong. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. in what used to be my home office, surrounded by boxes of everything I'm about to lose. My hands are shaking. Not from the cold, but from the rage and betrayal that's been eating me alive for the past month since I discovered what my brother did to me. Let me start from the beginning, because maybe if I write it all down, I'll understand how I became this. How I became the kind of person who hands over their entire life's work to someone and watches them burn it down while smiling at family dinners. 3 years ago, I had everything. A thriving digital marketing agency that I built from nothing. Started in my garage with a laptop and a dream, working 80-hour weeks, sleeping on the floor of my first tiny office because I couldn't afford an apartment and rent. I called it Summit Solutions because I thought we were going to reach the top together. My girlfriend Sarah believed in me when nobody else did. She ate ramen noodles for dinner so I could invest in better equipment. She worked double shifts at the diner while I chased clients who wouldn't pay their invoices. When I finally landed my first big corporate contract, she cried harder than I did. By year 2, we were pulling in 6 figures. I proposed to Sarah in the same garage where it all started. She said yes before I even finished asking. We started talking about kids, about buying a house with a real office, about building something that would last. That's when my brother Jake came back into the picture. Jake had always been the golden child. Star athlete in high school, full college scholarship, MBA from a prestigious school. But he'd been bouncing between corporate jobs for years, never quite finding his place. When he called me last spring, he sounded defeated. "Man, I'm tired of making other people rich," he said. "You've got something real here. Something that matters. I want to help you take it to the next level." I should have remembered that Jake had never helped me with anything growing up. When I was getting bullied at school, he told me to handle it myself. When I needed money for my first car, he spent his savings on designer clothes instead of lending me $50. When I graduated from college and couldn't find work, he was too busy with his career to even return my calls. But success makes you forget the past sometimes. Makes you think people have changed. "I've been watching what you're doing from afar," he continued. "You're leaving money on the table. You could be landing Fortune 500 clients, but you're stuck in small business mode. I know people. I know systems. Let me come in as a partner and help you scale this thing." Sarah was cautious from the start. "Something feels off," she said after Jake's first visit to our office. "He keeps asking about the financials, about who has access to what accounts. Why does he need to know all that if he's just coming in to help with sales?" I defended him. God, I defended him like an idiot. "He's my brother," I told her. "He's got an MBA. He knows business in ways I don't. If we want to compete with the big agencies, we need someone with his background." The first red flag was how quickly he wanted access to everything. Within his first week, he was asking to be added to all our banking accounts, to have signing authority on contracts, and to be listed as a co-owner on official documents. "It's just easier this way," he explained. "When I'm talking to clients, they need to know I can make decisions. If I have to run everything by you first, we'll lose deals." Made sense at the time. Jake was smooth with clients in ways I never was. He wore expensive suits, knew all the corporate buzzwords, could golf with CEOs, and make them laugh. Within 2 months, he'd landed us 3 major contracts that tripled our monthly revenue. Sarah kept asking questions I didn't want to hear. Why is he pushing so hard to restructure everything? The business was growing fine before he got here. And why does he need his own separate company credit card? Why can't he just submit expenses like everyone else? I was successful. We'd moved into a real office space downtown. I'd hired 4 new employees. Sarah had quit the diner and was helping with operations full-time. We were finally living the life we'd dreamed about. "You're being paranoid," I told her. "Jake's family. He's making us more money than we've ever seen. Why would you want to sabotage that?" The fight started getting worse. Sarah would find discrepancies in the books, weird transfers she couldn't explain, new accounts that had been opened without her knowledge. I'd make excuses. Jake would have smooth explanations for everything. "Your girlfriend doesn't trust me," Jake said one evening after Sarah had stormed out of a meeting. "That's going to be a problem as we grow. Maybe she's not the right fit for where we're headed." I should have ended it right there. Should have told Jake that Sarah was the reason any of this existed, that she'd sacrificed more for this business than he ever would. Should have seen that he was driving a wedge between us on purpose. Instead, I started having doubts about Sarah. "She's holding us back," Jake would whisper. "She doesn't understand high-level strategy. She's small town, small thinking. You're going to have to choose between growing this business and keeping her happy." The worst part is how reasonable he made it sound. How he'd point out every mistake Sarah made, every question she asked, every concern she raised, and frame it as evidence that she wasn't capable of handling our success. I stopped sharing financial information with her. Started having meetings with Jake that she wasn't invited to. When she'd ask about new contracts or changes to our banking setup, I'd tell her not to worry about it, that Jake and I had everything handled. "You're shutting me out," she said one night, tears in her eyes. This was supposed to be our dream together. Now I feel like a stranger in the business we built. It's not personal, I lied. It's just business. Jake knows what he's doing. 2 weeks later, she moved out of our apartment. I can't watch you destroy everything we worked for, she said as she packed her bags. And I can't watch you destroy yourself. When you remember who you used to be, call me. But I won't be around to watch you become someone I don't recognize. Jake me a party that night. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. You're free to focus on what matters now. I convinced myself I was better off without her doubt and negativity. Jake and I were partners now. We were going to conquer the business world together. I had no idea I was celebrating the beginning of my execution. The first sign that something was catastrophically wrong came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was reviewing our quarterly projections when I noticed our main operating account was showing a balance of $127. Not $127,000. $127. My heart stopped. We should have had close to $400,000 in that account. 3 major client payments had come in the previous week. I'd seen the notifications on my phone. I called Jake immediately. Hey, there's some kind of banking error, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Our main account is showing almost empty, but we just got paid by Morrison Industries and TechFlow Solutions. Can you check the other accounts? There was a pause. Too long a pause. Oh, I moved most of the funds to the high-yield savings account we set up, he said casually. Better interest rates. I thought I mentioned it. Relief flooded through me. Of course. Jake was always optimizing our finances, finding ways to make our money work harder. Which account is that? I want to check the balance. Another pause. I'll send you the details later. I'm in a client meeting right now. He never sent the details. When I pressed him about it the next day, he had a new explanation. I moved it to our investment portfolio. Short-term bonds. We'll see better returns, and I can liquidate quickly when we need cash flow. When I asked to see the portfolio, he said the statements were mailed to his address and he'd bring them to the office. He never brought them. This went on for 2 weeks. Every day, a new excuse. A new explanation. The money was always somewhere safe, always working for us, always just one phone call away from being accessible. I started having trouble sleeping. Sarah had been texting me occasionally since she moved out. Just checking in, she said. Making sure I was okay. I'd been ignoring most of her messages, too proud to admit that I missed her, too stubborn to acknowledge that maybe she'd been right about Jake. But desperation makes you reach out to people you've pushed away. Can we meet for coffee? I texted her on a Thursday night. I need to talk to someone. She agreed, and I could hear the concern in her voice when I called. We met at the little cafe where we'd had our first date. She looked good. Healthier somehow, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. It made me realize how stressed and hollow I'd become. You look terrible, she said, not unkindly. What's going on? I told her about the missing money. About Jake's shifting explanations. About the growing pit in my stomach, that something was very, very wrong. We need to access every account, she said immediately. All of them. Right now. If he's been moving money around without clear documentation, you need to know where it is. I can't just accuse my brother of. Of what? You're not accusing him of anything. You're checking on your business's finances. That's not an accusation, it's basic business practice. That night, I logged into every account I had access to. Checking accounts, savings accounts, business credit cards, and even the PayPal account we used for smaller transactions. Everything was empty or nearly empty. $50 here, $200 there. Accounts that should have contained our entire operating capital were drained. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I called Jake at midnight. Where's our money? I said when he answered. All of it. It's gone. Calm down, he said. What are you talking about? Every account is empty, Jake. Every single one. Where is our money? Look, there's been some temporary cash flow issues. I've been covering some unexpected expenses. It's all documented. Come by my apartment tomorrow and I'll show you everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office chair until sunrise, staring at bank statements that showed months of transfers I didn't recognize, to accounts I'd never seen before. When I got to Jake's apartment the next morning, he wasn't there. His landlord was, though. Jake had moved out 3 days earlier. Paid his lease termination fee in cash and disappeared. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. I called his girlfriend. She said they'd broken up weeks ago, and she hadn't heard from him since. I called our mom. She said Jake had mentioned something about a business opportunity in Seattle, but she didn't have any details. That's when I knew. I hired a forensic accountant with money I didn't have, putting it on my credit card. It took her 3 days to trace what had happened. Jake had been systematically transferring money out of our business accounts for 6 months. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums. He'd opened accounts in his name at different banks, always using his co-owner authority to make the transfers look legitimate. The final transfer happened 2 weeks ago. $347,000 moved from our main operating account to a personal account he'd opened in Nevada. An account I wasn't listed on and had no access to. He'd stolen everything. Not just the money we'd made since he joined the company. He'd also emptied our emergency fund, our tax reserve account, and even the money Sarah and I had saved for our wedding. Everything we'd built. Everything we'd sacrificed for. Gone. The forensic accountant put it in terms I couldn't deny. Mr. Peterson, your brother has committed embezzlement and wire fraud. These are federal crimes. You need to contact the FBI and your attorney immediately. But here's the sick part. Even with all the evidence, even with the paper trail and the bank records and the obvious theft, part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation. I kept thinking he'd call. That he'd explain this was all a misunderstanding, some complicated financial strategy I didn't understand. That the brother who used to build blanket forts with me when we were kids wouldn't steal my entire life's work and disappear. He never called. The business died within 2 weeks. Without operating capital, I couldn't make payroll. Couldn't pay rent on our office space. Couldn't fulfill the contracts Jake had signed that required upfront investments in equipment and personnel. I had to let all 4 employees go. People who had trusted me, who had left other jobs to join our team, who had believed in what we were building together. I'm sorry, I said to each of them individually. I trusted the wrong person, and now you're paying for my mistake. Some of them were angry. Some were understanding. All of them were disappointed. The worst was Maria, our lead graphic designer. She was a single mom who'd been planning to use her Christmas bonus to take her daughter on their first real vacation. I believed in you, she said as she packed up her desk. We all did. We thought you were different from other bosses. We thought you cared about us. I do care. This wasn't supposed to happen. I'm going to fight to get the money back, and when I do. When you do, it'll be too late, she said. I can't wait for maybe. I've got bills to pay and a kid to feed. She was right, of course. By the time the legal system finished processing my case, if it ever did, everyone would have moved on. The damage would be permanent. I called Sarah that night. He's gone, I said when she answered. Jake. He took everything and disappeared. Silence on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, she finally said. I know how much that business meant to you. It meant everything to us, I corrected. And I let it away because I wanted to believe my brother cared about me more than money. What are you going to do now? That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when you discover that the person you trusted most in the world has destroyed everything you've ever worked for? I'm writing the final part of this story from a studio apartment that costs more per month than I used to spend on coffee. It's been 4 months since Jake disappeared with everything I'd built, and I'm still discovering new ways that his betrayal destroyed my life. The FBI opened a case, but they were honest about the chances of getting any money back. These types of financial crimes are hard to prosecute across state lines, the agent told me. Even if we catch him, the money is usually gone by then. Spent or hidden in offshore accounts. Jake wasn't some amateur criminal. He'd planned this perfectly. I found out later that he'd been setting up his exit strategy almost from the day he joined the business. The Seattle business opportunity our mom mentioned? It was real. Jake had been interviewing for executive positions at tech companies while he was stealing from me. He'd used the client successes from our business, the ones he'd achieved with my money and my team, as leverage to land a 6-figure job with stock options. He was living in a downtown Seattle condo now. I knew because I'd hired a private investigator with money I borrowed from my retirement account. The Pi sent me photos of Jake in his new life. Expensive suits, fancy restaurants, a new girlfriend who thought he was a successful entrepreneur who'd sold his share of a digital marketing company. He was using my story. My sacrifice. My years of sleeping on office floors and eating ramen dinners. He'd stolen my history along with my money. The worst part was how he'd covered his tracks with our family. Our mom called me a month after he disappeared. Jake told me about the business troubles, she said. He feels terrible that the partnership didn't work out. He said you two had different visions for the company's future, and it was better to part ways before it got. Mom, he didn't just leave the partnership. He stole everything. Oh, honey. I'm sure it feels that way, but business disagreements can make things seem worse than they are. Jake said he tried to work things out with you, but you were being unreasonable about his compensation package. That's when I realized Jake had been well with our family for months. Planting seeds about my difficult personality, my unrealistic expectations, and my inability to share credit for the business's success. So when he disappeared with the money, he'd already constructed a narrative that made me look like the problem. Our dad called a few days later with the same story. Our sister sent me a text saying she was sorry Jake and I couldn't work things out, but she hoped I'd learned something about treating partners fairly. Jake had stolen my family along my business. Sarah and I tried to reconcile. She moved back in with me after Jake disappeared, said she wanted to help me rebuild. But the person who came back wasn't the same person who'd left. The trust was broken, not just in Jake, but in my judgment. In my ability to protect the things that mattered. I can't stop wondering what else you might be wrong about, she said one night after I'd been on the phone with lawyers for 3 hours. If you could be so blind about your brother, how do I know you won't make the same mistake again? She was right to wonder. I'd proven that I could be manipulated, that I could be turned against the people who loved me in favor of someone who was using me. I'd shown that when it came down to choosing between her and Jake, I'd chosen wrong every time. We tried couples therapy. The therapist asked me to explain why I'd trusted Jake over Sarah's concerns. He was family, I said. He was my brother. I thought that meant something. What did Sarah's loyalty mean to you? The therapist asked. I couldn't answer that. Because the truth was, I'd taken Sarah's loyalty for granted. She'd proven herself to me every day for 3 years, but I'd been willing to throw that away the moment Jake suggested she was holding me back. Sarah moved out again 2 months ago. This time for good. I can't build a future with someone who doesn't trust my judgment, she said. Every time I raise a concern or ask a question, you shut down. You're so afraid of being manipulated again that you won't listen to anyone, including people who care about you. She was getting married next month. To her old high school boyfriend who'd been trying to win her back since we started dating. A guy who'd never had much ambition but who'd also never betrayed anyone who trusted him. I hope you find peace, she said when she returned my grandmother's engagement ring. But I can't wait around for you to figure out how to trust again. The business was officially dead. I'd had to file for bankruptcy, both personal and corporate. The apartment Sarah and I had shared was gone. The office downtown was gone. The car I'd bought when we landed our first major contract was repossessed. I was working at a call center now. $8 an hour, no benefits, helping people troubleshoot their internet connections from a cubicle that smelled like other people's lunch. The guy in the cubicle next to me used to run his accounting firm before his business partner embezzled everything and disappeared. We didn't talk about it. At night, I'd lie in my studio apartment and think about the different choices I could have made. If I'd listened to Sarah's concerns. If I'd insisted on transparency from the beginning. If I'd remembered that Jake had never been trustworthy, even as kids. But the hardest part wasn't the money or the business or even losing Sarah. The hardest part was realizing that Jake had never seen me as his brother. To him, I was just another mark. Another sucker to be exploited. All those family dinners where he'd asked about my business? He was gathering intelligence. All those times he'd seemed proud of my success? He was calculating how to take it. All those moments where I thought we were finally connecting as adults? He was setting up the biggest con of his life. I'd kept one thing from the business. A photo from our grand opening party. Sarah and I were cutting a ribbon in front of our first real office, surrounded by our employees and a few early clients who'd become friends. Everyone was smiling. Everyone believed we were building something that would last. I looked at that photo now and saw all the people I'd let down. Maria, who'd trusted me with her financial security. Tom, who'd left a stable corporate job to join our team. Sarah, who'd sacrificed everything to help me build something meaningful. They'd all believed in me, and I destroyed their faith by choosing to trust someone who saw kindness as weakness and loyalty as something to be exploited. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Jake got a promotion at his new company. He's doing well for himself. Have you thought about reaching out to congratulate him? Maybe it's time to put this business disagreement behind you. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it without responding. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. Some people are exactly who they show themselves to be, even when you desperately want to believe otherwise. I turned off the light and tried to sleep, but I kept thinking about something the private investigator had told me. Jake had done this before. Not the same elaborate scheme, but smaller betrayals. College roommates who'd trusted him with shared expenses. Girlfriends who'd loaned him money he never repaid. A former employer who'd discovered missing petty cash right before Jake quit. I wasn't his first victim. I was just his biggest score. The worst part is knowing I'd probably do it again. Not with Jake, but with the next person who came along promising to help, claiming to care, wearing a familiar face that reminded me of better times. Because that's what people like me do. We trust until it destroys us. We believe in family and loyalty and second chances, even when all the evidence says we shouldn't. We hand over everything we've built to people who see our love as their opportunity, and then we wonder why we're left with nothing but the bitter knowledge that the person who us most was someone we would have died to protect.